Intense protests in Chicago after border agents shot an armed woman Saturday morning. DHS says agents acted in self-defense after she rammed them with her car. A hospital has released her into FBI custody. Christina Coleman is live with more. Hello, Christina.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, things also got heated last night between anti-ICE protesters and federal agents in the Brighton Park neighborhood of Chicago last night. Take a look at this disturbing video.
Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back!
On the ground there says anti-ICE protesters were throwing objects at ICE agents and vehicles. Law enforcement deployed tear gas to break up the violent crowd. ICE, CBP, and FBI agents were all at the scene, and at one point, anti-ICE protesters attempted to block a major roadway in Broadview, Illinois. State troopers made several arrests after that incident. Also, federal authorities say Border Patrol law enforcement officers were ambushed by domestic terrorists who rammed federal agents with their vehicles and boxed them in with their cars the night before in Broadview, Illinois, that same area where anti-ICE protesters have been gathering for weeks now. Take a look at this. DHS says this woman, Miramar Martinez, was driving one of the vehicles. They say she was armed with a semi-automatic weapon and has a history of doxing federal agents. And authorities identified this man that you see there as Anthony Ian Santos Ruiz. They say he was a driver of another vehicle in this incident. DHS said, quote, the scene became increasingly violent as more domestic terrorists gathered and began throwing smoke, gas, rocks, and bottles at DHS law enforcement. Another domestic terrorist was arrested for assaulting CBP at the scene. Extremely dangerous. Take a listen.
A 10-car caravan followed and stalked our agents and then circled them in and pinned them down. They had to shoot their way out of their cars in order to get to safety. So we do have some bounties that have been released on the heads of our agents, $10,000 to kill them, and they're naming specific agents.
Now, this comes days after violent clashes between anti-ICE protesters and federal law enforcement outside of the ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois. It seems like it's happening there night after night. Yesterday, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said he was notified that the Trump administration intends to federalize 300 members of the National Guard, a move he strongly opposes. Pritzker said, quote, the Trump administration's Department of War gave me an ultimatum. Call up your troops or we will. It is absolutely outrageous and un-American to demand a governor send military troops within our own borders and against our will. So Pritzker maintains there's no need for military troops on the ground in Illinois, and he says that he will not call up the National Guard. And in Oregon, where there's been violent protests outside of the ICE facility in Portland for days now, in response to all of that, the Trump administration announced that 200 Oregon National Guard troops would be federalized to protect federal property. But in a ruling yesterday, a federal judge in Oregon temporarily blocked the Trump administration from doing that. Well, the Trump administration is already fighting the judge's decision. They filed a notice of appeal to the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals late yesterday, so we will see how that all plays out. Mike?
Christina Coleman, thanks very much. Now let's bring in Fox News contributor and defense attorney Ted Williams. Ted, welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
I want to play some sound from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, and I'll get you to react to it.
Sure.
Our intelligence indicates that these people are organized. They're getting more and more people on their team as far as attacking officers, and they're making plans to ambush them and to kill them. We have specific officers and agents that have bounties that have been put out on their heads. It's been $2,000 to kidnap them, $10,000 to kill them. They've released their pictures. They've sent them between their networks, and it's an extremely dangerous situation.
Very dangerous situation. Ted, what's your reaction?
Extremely dangerous, and it's sad that we've gotten to where we are in this country where you have individuals out here who are disrespecting law enforcement officers who are only trying to do their duty. You know, I grew up, Mike, in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we had something called Officer Friendly, where the citizens knew that what the police officers were doing was to be respected, and they were respected. And now we find, unfortunately, that throughout this country, law enforcement officers are under siege, and that should not be.
About the incident yesterday in the Chicago area where federal agents were boxed in and threatened, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin saying, quote, law enforcement was forced to deploy their weapons and fire defensive shots at an armed U.S. citizen. Does that suggest they felt like their lives were at risk?
Absolutely. I mean, when you box law enforcement officers in, as they were in Chicago there, and the law enforcement officers actually seen one of the individuals with a rifle, law enforcement officers have the right to protect themselves under those circumstances.
Dan Bongino from the FBI says this effort to intimidate federal agents will not slow them down and the mission will not stop. Is that your expectation as well?
It is definitely my expectation, Mike. These law enforcement officers have been given a job to do, and they're going to perform their job as they've always done in this country.
There were some complaints yesterday from Homeland Security officials that local police in the Chicago area did not step in to help these law enforcement, these federal agents. Does that concern you as someone with a law enforcement background?
Very concerning and alarming. The one thing that law enforcement officers have is the backup of other law enforcement officers. And under the circumstances of what we've been told, I think there's definitely a need for an investigation to determine if Chicago law enforcement officers did not back up federal law enforcement officers. That is just inappropriate under the circumstances.
Is this one of the most dangerous situations you've seen in your career facing federal agents?
You know, Mike, it is where, according to the Secretary of Homeland Security, there are bounties out on law enforcement officers, where law enforcement officers, unfortunately, cannot go home because they're being followed, where law enforcement officers have to wear masks because they don't want their identities out there because they're concerned about their families. That should never happen in America.
They swear an oath to protect and defend, right? And they're doing their jobs and they're being threatened. It's really sick.
It's unfair. It's unfair to those good men and women out here who put that uniform on, and all they want to do is serve and protect their communities every day.
Ted Williams, great to see you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.